All right, now let's get to the patch notes here. Now, please forgive me, my voice is really messed up. I got sick, and it's the day of the patch, so it is what it is. Feel free to tell me in the comments down below what you think I sound like. But let's get into the new content here for the July 13th patch. We have the new map, obviously, Castle Kandar, and the 2 new weapons. I'll put footage of them up right here, but things to know about the explosive crossbow. It works with Ed's passive, the crossbow mastery, and his crossbow mastery was lowered from 20% to 10%. So not quite as strong as it was before, but it's cool that he works with both of them. The mace is a weapon that kind of sits in between the sledgehammer and the shovel in terms of balance bar. I think it has 65 balance bar damage at base, and I think it does 65 damage at base. But things to know about the mace that are unique is that it is a blunt, one-handed weapon. There's no other weapon in the game, I think, that is as strong at base that's a one-hander as the mace is. So pretty cool. Another thing to know about the mace is that it does a lot of overhead attacks when you do your heavies. So I think 1, 3, and 4 are all overhead attacks. So that might be something to investigate for you people that are really into dismemberment out there. And now we have a bunch of new outfits here too, which is really cool. So let's go into the collection here. And Arthur has a new outfit, as does Henry, and so does the Necromancer, Evil Ash. So if you go into outfits here, we get to see Arthur and his glorious hair. Maybe I can get out of the way here. Yeah, you get to see his awesome hair that he has in the movies, or in Army of Darkness, I should say. So I'm really excited you can finally see that in his terrible haircut. Because when they show him here, you don't really get to see how bad it is, but it's way better in the new skin. So I'm actually going to click that. Yeah, here we go. And then let's go over to Henry here as well. Henry has his Scottish Vibe shirt, I believe it's called. Yeah. That's kind of cool looking too. I like the kilt on him. Honestly, both of these are really good though. I don't know if I'm going to, like, I'll rock the Scottish Vibe just because it's new, but I think I do like the default outfit a little bit more just because it's so red. Now let's move on to the stuff that they added for Evil Ash, which is actually pretty cool. And now you might be wondering, what is the Screamers tab that you see on all of them? I'll show you a little bit more with Evil Ash here, but let's go over to the outfits here. Now he has the gilded outfit, so everything's in gold. And the elite units actually have guts now, which is kind of funny. And then if you go over to the Screamers here, Screamers are the thing that when you use your charge skill and go through the survivors with that jump scare, well, that's what the Screamers are. So if you are the demon, you can customize what they see when you jump scare through them. So I can click this, and now I can use this cool skeleton crew Screamer. Cool that they're putting a bunch of these in there. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them end up being animated in the future. And then on the survivor side, if you're wondering what that means that when you get jump scared, you can also customize what the demon sees. But I don't think there's any of these out right now for any of the survivors. They'll probably be coming. If you're wondering how to get them, I think you can buy them, or they're included with the season pass. One other new thing that they added is the exploration mode. So what you can do here is you just click on in, and then it'll put you in one of the maps. I wish you could choose what map you get put into. Kind of silly that you can't. So yeah, we're actually on the castle here, which is kind of cool. But yeah, you see how I don't actually start with anything? Oh, I guess I don't start with anything even if I'm Ash. But if I take a peek at the map here, we'll go over the map in a whole new video here, but the map's pretty cool. Something to know about this right away, though, is that the Dark Ones, what I've seen so far, they like to spawn right here, and they like to spawn up here, and they also like to spawn over here. There might be a 4th location. I haven't tested the bejesus out of this yet, but those are 3 really common locations for those of you out there that like to pounce on the Dark Ones right away. And something to note is that each one of these has a little revival station right next to them, so that makes things a little bit tougher on the demon. One other cool thing to know about this map is that this area is very demon favored, and the rest of this is kind of survivor favored, because there's not really a whole lot of rocks and stuff that are going to get in your way if you try driving. One quick thing, again, I'm going to have a whole video about this, but one quick thing to pick up on is you see the car icons on this map. Something people are curious about is if they're cars. Well, yes, there's cars, but take a peek. You'll probably see it here. If you walk up. Oh, actually, you know what? Screw it. This isn't one of the cars that spawns in. But they have this thing here. They have the modified Delta, which is pretty sick. Bone Crusher. It says Groovy on the back. Stay back, demons. But I want to show you the other thing that happens with cars here if you get close to them. So I bet you if I come up here, you'll be able to see it, because there's another car icon over here. But yeah, see that sparkle? There it is. So cars will spawn in unless they're the modified Delta. And then this is how you get cars in this map. And the reason why they spawn in is because it's like a thematic thing, because you're actually like in the 1300s. And then something knows these cars will light up as gold if you're already in a car, but once you get out, it'll spawn for you. Ta-da! Now, personally, I'm not going to use exploration mode that much, because there's a lot of things that you just don't really get to have in exploration mode. Like, I picked Hunter Ash here, but I didn't spawn in with my double barrel. I don't think my chest ability is working for me to find chests. So really what I'm going to be doing a lot, if I want to test stuff, is I'm either going to do my private match stuff like I already do, or I am going to just go into solo AI because it seems like the solo AI was changed. So if I go into play here and it says play solo, right? Something seems to have changed where the demon is way less aggressive. He doesn't find you immediately anymore like he used to. So it's basically exploration mode. Honestly, I'd argue it's even easier in some sense because there's not traps everywhere right away. So play solo AI if you really want to get a feel for how things are going to turn out. So one thing that a lot of people are going to be excited about right away is the options in the menu, frankly, because if you take a peek here, we now have things like push to talk, thank goodness. And we can also adjust our settings a little bit more. So things like VSync and getting rid of motion blur, and the game's way better without motion blur. Oh my God, it's so much nicer to play. And then they also added the ability to get rid of the narrator talking. So I guess this will depend on the person. I think some people might turn this off if they play Demon a lot. That way Linda can't yell at you if they find a map piece. Why do these guys still have hands? I'm like, I don't know, Linda, I'm level 1. Back off. So stuff like that's going to be really nice. They also added options for the input. No, not the input. It's going to be under game, actually. And you have sensitivity options for your controllers now, which is really nice. So a lot of quality of life things that people were kind of confused that weren't in the game right away. Well, now they're here. Something to note in terms of your resolution and stuff like that, I do have a Twitter post, which remind me to put in the description if I don't. But if you have problems with your resolution or things aren't responding the way they're supposed to, really all you have to do is override your DPI settings. Again, I'll have a whole tweet about it step by step on how to fix it if you're on PC. They also added a couple other things, like there's an added FX for a stunned unit. So if you take a look at a stunned unit now, they have like little stars going above their head, which is kind of funny. And they also added FX for the car when it disappears. I haven't seen that yet, but I'll just take their word for it. And oh yeah, change the Master of Crossbow skill to affect all the crossbows in the game. But again, this is basically just for Ed. So if you take a look at Ed here, he has the ability to go ahead and improve his crossbows with crossbow mastery, I think at level 10 Ed. But this used to be 20%, now it's only 10. But it also affects the explosive crossbow and just the regular crossbows, okay? So Ed kind of got nerfed in a bunch of ways this patch, but a lot of it was indirect, and we'll talk about that as we get farther into the patch notes here. But now let's go on back to what we got over here, and balance changes start to kick in, and there's a lot going on here. Actually, you know what? Before we get into that, it says general bug fixes. Let's talk about some of these bug fixes, because a lot of things changed on the bug fixes front, okay? So one of the major things you'll see right away in terms of bug fixes is if you go into the menus here, a lot of this has been fixed. Like, for example, with Annie, it used to say she'd add 100% extra damage, but it was actually 30. Well, now it actually says 30. And then same thing on Kelly here. Kelly was one of those characters that had their stuff that wasn't listed correctly. So now this is listed more accurately. It's 10-second duration, but a 5-second bleed duration, which, again, this is how it worked before. It didn't change. It's just that it's listed accurately now. Also, something to know, though, is that this was increased back up to 2% per second on Kelly. Her melee damage being increased the longer you're in combat. We talked about this a while ago. They brought it down to 1%. And my theory was that they were just trying to put a band-aid on her until they could actually fix her, and then they might restore it. That's exactly what they did. It's back up to 2% here on Kelly. And if you go through these menus, there's a lot of things that you'll see that were fixed. I believe Arthur was also fixed with his boosting of range damage, which is good. Some other ones that I think are kind of important to note, there's probably a bunch of these, and maybe we'll make a separate video for all the ones as I pick up on them. But Kandarian Fury has a better example now of the longer you spend possessing a unit, the more damage you can inflict, and it actually shows you what the caps are, which is 20%. And again, there's got to be tons of these that I'm probably missing that were listed inaccurately. But another really important one here is the Evil Ash anti-heal. It says the effect duration is 4 seconds. Frankly, I think it always was, but it was listed as 1 second. So now this is 4 seconds. And in case you don't know how this works, this means you can't receive healing after Evil Ash hits you, and you also can't heal other people if Evil Ash hits you with Cheryl. Like, you can't even touch your Shems, which is actually a really big deal. Now, we're still under the category of bug fixes here, but we can't really talk about this next bug fix without talking about the possession changes. So they changed a lot with possessions, and we'll get a little bit more into the numbers when we see them in the patch notes. But initially, something to pay attention to here is if you take a look at the possession cost on a basic unit, it's 60. And then if I spawn in an elite unit, it is 70. So this is way, way, way higher than it was before, which is going to make it so it's much harder to do that early game possession rush where you just keep going one after the other because they only cost 20. But something to note is that once you get your possession to level 3, it has a huge reduction on how much this costs. So this is going to be something that a lot of demons are rushing for, is to get possession level 3, because if you take a peek here, it says 75% infernal energy reduction. So 1 and then 2, and what you'll see is they only cost 15 now. and they only cost 18 on the elite side of things. And now this is the same for every single demon. There was differences between the puppeteer and then the necromancer and the warlord, but now they're all the same. The puppeteer had more expensive units, but now they're all the same. So you can come in here and possess. Now, in terms of bug fixes, something that a lot of people are really curious about is puke canceling, or like you could dodge out of a puke to get some easy attacks in. You can't do that anymore. So if I'm sitting here smacking my dodge button right now, nothing's working. I can't touch anything. Once you puke, you're stuck in it until the puking is done. One other thing to note is that how fast your energy drains when you possess something is also much faster until, again, you start going through this possession tree. Pretty much what they did was they made possessing stuff a lot weaker in the early game, but it kind of goes back to how it was in the late game. Honestly, elite units might get a bit of a buff though, and we'll talk about that as we get later into the patch notes here. One other thing to note here is with the boss, Henrietta. I'll also go into Evil Ash because there's something specific about him. But if I go into Henrietta here, if I can do a bunch of attacks, and then people are wondering if I could like do a fart and then kind of get out of that and do some animation canceling that way, it kind of looks like the answer is no. You can't fart to get out of an attack. Now you can attack immediately after farting, but you can't fart to get out of an attack and then do another attack. But on the note of animation canceling, there is still some stuff in the game. So if I go back to this elite unit here, it seems like they did a lot to affect the dodges, but they didn't do a lot to affect the skills, even though Henrietta kind of was affected. So if you take a peek here, I can still do my heavy, and then do a 2, and then do another heavy. So that still exists in the game for some of you that like to use the elite units here on the warlord side. And again, elite units are going to be a really big deal here. Another example of this is if you take a look at the necromancer. So let me load into that. And now on to Evil Ash here. Another big one that people are wondering about is, can he still do his infinite dodging attack? So what he could do before was he could go light attack, light attack, light attack, light attack, dodge, and then he can go into more light attacks, which made it so he just had a really fast tempo. But now if I go to go ahead and do this, I go through my 4 attacks, and then you can't dodge to keep going anymore. It doesn't work. Your dodge is way after the fact, as you just saw. However, you can still use your 2 to go ahead and do something like that. So I can go 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and I press my 2, and then I can keep going again. So that's going to be how you get that big combo going. Now, you can only use your 2 every once in a while here. As you can see, it's that big radius that comes out for Resurrection, I believe. However, it is something you can still do. And now onto the topic of the basic units here. If I were to go ahead and possess a basic unit, I can still do like 1, 2, 3, and then do a war cry, and then keep attacking pretty quickly. Now, something you'll see here with the puppeteers, again, the units cost 60 now, but again, if I go up into here, they go back down to 15, so parity across all of them. But the puppeteer got a huge nerf this patch, and I'm assuming it's under the general bug fixes, but it's absolutely terrible for puppeteer players. Honestly, it completely ruins the personality of the puppeteer, in my opinion. So something that you had before with the puppeteer was the power possession. And something to know about power possession is it has a cooldown of 90 seconds at default. Right? So if you were to power possess something in the past, your cooldown would start as soon as you start power possessing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then let's say you're in this thing for 30, 40, 50 seconds. Well, that would reflect in your cooldown. So if it's a 90-second cooldown and you were in this thing for 50 seconds, well, when you leave the power possession, well, your cooldown would still be counting down and it'd be starting at about 40 seconds, right? Well, now what they did was they made it so it's always starting at 90 once you leave the power possession. So this makes it way harder to chain your power possessions together. And to me, that was a big part of the puppeteer's playstyle, because if you are able to stay in your power possession for a long time, well, you're actively playing around that style. Now it doesn't matter. And to me, like, I don't know. I think that really hurts the puppeteer. Each one of these demons kind of had a play style around their skill. So with the warlord, it is using your skill to prevent people from F-chaining. For the puppeteer, it was staying in your unit for a long time to try to chain your power possessions. And then for the necromancer, it was using your duder to go ahead and try to pull the survivor team apart from each other so they would separate, and then you could trap people as somebody tries to go get the flautist. The puppeteer really lost a big part of its personality with this change, and I don't agree with it, but it is what it is. And you'll have to figure out some different ways to play your puppeteer, you puppeteer mains out there. Now let's get into what it says with balance changes here. There's a ton of changes to the ranged weapon values. Now, almost every single weapon in the game that is a ranged weapon got nerfed, but it's the upgrades that got nerfed. So a lot of the gray weapons have the same value they had before. Like a gray revolver is still 150, and a gray crossbow is still 250. However, their upgrades and the cadence in which they upgrade is way lower. And this list here is basically just a big example of all the things they changed. One of the most notable things that might be a little confusing to people here is the shotguns. It'll say like double barrel goes from 57 to 42 or 67 to 52. Or like, let's say the legendary boomstick. Everybody knew it had a 666 value for the legendary boomstick, but you'll see it says 95 to 60. I'm assuming what they mean is that's damage per pellet. So the damage numbers that you'll see are actually way lower than they were before. Like, I think a legendary shotgun before, pardon me if I'm wrong here, was like 595 damage, and now a legendary shotgun's down to like 330. So damage across the board has been super nerfed on the ranged weapons. So even though this isn't a direct nerf to hunters, it's basically a nerf to hunters because they are the ones that multiply out the best with ranged weapons. So they're the ones that are going to be hit the hardest. Now, in terms of what this means, there's a lot of different things going on with meta implications here. So to kind of give you an idea of what some of those things could mean, if you go into collection here, take a look at Ed. Well, if a ranged weapon being upgraded doesn't mean as much anymore because a gray weapon and a purple weapon are super close in damage values now, that means the collector loses a little bit of value because getting a higher level chest isn't quite as important from a ranged value perspective. Now, this is still going to be really nice to get your pink Fs rolling, and it's still going to be really nice for ranged weapons, but it is kind of an indirect nerf to Ed. And again, like I said before, this is an indirect nerf to hunters, and it's a big one because they cannot crap out damage anywhere near as well as they could before. You guys let me know what you think of this, but this might actually mean that Annie gets a little bit of a buff in a sense, because even though the numbers that she is going to be buffing aren't going to be as big anymore, I think it's going to matter more, because if Annie gave an extra 30% to a hunter that was already one-tapping anyway, it was just overkill damage. If she gave an extra 25% damage to somebody who was one-tapping anyway, it was just overkill damage. Well, now since they're not going to be doing overkill as much, these values from Annie might actually mean a little bit more in practice. And probably the biggest part of this and how it's going to affect the meta of things is elite units here. And now actually, before we get into it here, something I do want to check because I have a feeling they didn't touch the elite units here. So we'll go back up into some of these things that they changed, but what I really want to see here is the changes to the unit damage here. So at level 5 possession, you get a 35% damage boost to your balance bar damage. Now, they went ahead and they changed a bunch of the balance bar to make it so they're lower. So 35%, maybe you're just going to be back up to where you were before, right? But let's go ahead and take a look at the Warlord Elite unit. So it's 525 now, right? Well, if you take 525 times 1.35, what you'll actually get is a balance bar value of 708. So at the end of the game, the Warlord Elite units are not only going to have a bigger balance bar, they are also going to be taking less damage because the hunters can't crap out damage as much. So what this means is that attacking the book with elite units is going to be much more effective. You might get an extra hit or two in. So I think a lot more demons, even though they're going to have a harder earlier game, they have much more potential to do well in the end game. So that's something to keep in mind. Use your elite units at the end of the game if you're a demon. This has always been a really good strategy for the Necromancer, especially with the comeback stronger stuff. But really big deal on pretty much all the demons now. Make sure you are using your really strong elite unit to go ahead and attack that book with when you possess it. That's going to be absolutely how you win. And then also your boss too, right? Because if the survivors can't crap out as much damage, this gives you more time to get more hits in. And then same thing even on the basic unit balance for the Warlord here, right? Now let's say it was 400 before, well now it's 325, but once you get that 5 possession upgrade, 325 times 1.35 is actually 438. So units are much weaker early game, but they're actually stronger than they were before once they reach late game. So it's a very different way of handling the game than what we're used to. So it'll be really interesting to see how late game plays out for a lot of demons. Melee weapon dismemberment damage, they made it so the chainsaw does a little bit more dismemberment. Honestly, it probably still should do more though. I think the chainsaw, like, it's one of those unique things to Ashe. Dismemberment is in a weird spot. Like, it can be really good, but you really have to commit to it and you have to get some good hits in and you have to be educated on what weapons hit where. And that's a very nuanced topic. Like, we've talked about how the lumberjack axe is really good for two-shotting possessions and stuff like that. If you do 2 heavies in a row that are the heavy one, like, you see how that just sounds complicated as I explain it out like that? Like, dismemberment can be good, but you really have to be educated on it. Maybe we'll do a whole video about it in the future. Support range increased from 5 to 8 meters. This also applies to amulets and shemps, which is really nice for Pablo and Sash here. Now, what I'm not sure about is if they change Cheryl's range at all once she's level 25. I haven't had a chance to test that yet. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comments down below. But Cheryl has always had better range than these two. But either way, it's a really nice buff for Sash and Pablo because they really, really needed it. They were so bad to play because their range was so low that 8 meters is going to make a huge difference for support players. I'm really excited to try out these guys and see how they feel now that their range was buffed. We also have to do that video where we talk about how much Shems heals for. It's way more complicated than you might have thought, but it's also way more simple than you might have thought. So we'll go more into that in another video. I've been talking about that for a while though. But basically, it depends on who's healing. Possessed unit damage, it looks like the Puppeteer got a buff across the board, but still that power possession nerf it really hurts the Puppeteer. Now, in terms of the Dan Slam, I haven't had a chance to test that yet, but a little bit that I played when I was playing with the streamer group we did yesterday, it looked like I got pushed back when I had the head slam on the ground. So the Dan Slam might not work as well anymore, or they might have just straight up fixed it. So we'll have to test it out as well. Cars, the possessed car damage. So if you run into somebody with a possessed car, you'll do more damage than you did before, which I think is good because it's just intuitive. Or if you run somebody over, you do damage to them. And then also, when the survivors shoot the car, it appears that the energy per hit was reduced. So that's actually really nice for the demons as well. And what you'll see here is a bunch of these infernal energy possession costs. We already talked about it pretty much, but the other thing to know is that the drain rate is much faster. But again, all of this is changed the more you get into your possessions here. So I'll give it one more good look here so you can really see it. Now, something to keep in mind still is that these are different per demon, mainly in the boss category. And then also the infernal energy economy category. Very different on the Puppeteer, but in terms of possession, it seems pretty straightforward across most of them. Again, a little bit of a difference if you, like I think the first chunk of the possession's a little different. But go ahead, take a look at this. So it's going to be your balance bar increases, your balance bar increases, your balance bar increases, and also your possession upkeep cost decreases. So this is going to make it so early game, you are not anywhere near as strong as a demon. Late game, you're actually going to be stronger than you were before. Okay, because these plus balance bars outperform the previous patch, but you have to make sure you're pumping points into possession. Something to know about possession is you need to reach certain levels in order to use it. Kind of like the same concept as you need to be level 10 before you can put a point into the boss. Well, same thing with possession. You need to keep increasing your threat level to keep putting points into possession, which is part of how they're gating people from just going full possession right away. Okay? So, very interesting, very different way to play the game nowadays. Something to note with this is since possessing basic units is going to cost so much early game, again, what this means is you can't just sit here and throw units at people. If they are in a death ball where there's like all 4 survivors together, you're wasting your time throwing basics at them. What you'll have to do is be more intelligent about how you are choosing to fight. So if you can get into a good one-on-one early game, it's definitely worth spending the 60 points to go ahead and damage the survivors, because you're going to win in a one-on-one, right? So you still get a lot of value out of that 60. But if they're deathballing, you should be doing other things. Something that some folks have been doing, I think Alucard is the first person I saw do this. He's a streamer on Twitch. Something that a lot of people are doing is they're flipping the cars of survivors, so the survivors can't drive around as much. And that costs 60 to possess a car anyway. So if you're going to keep spending 60 again and again and again, you might want to invest into taking the cars away from the survivors, because that's going to help you a lot late game when you can sit there and really corner them on one side of the map and they don't have a getaway car. Okay? So really consider car flipping. It's probably the most meta thing you can do right now. Infernal energy unit costs on events. I mean, frankly, you have so much energy when you're in an event anyway. It's interesting that they do change these. It's going to make things a little bit tougher. But again, once your possession stuff at level 3 is totally going to change these numbers anyway. So you can kind of take this with a grain of salt. By the time that they reach the events, none of this is going to be accurate anyway, because you're usually leveled up enough to at least have possession level 3 at that point. Demon upgrade possession. So yeah, we already talked about what happens during the upgrade phase for the possession side. And then also they did it for the bosses as well. Increased damage and health at level 4 and level 5 for the boss upgrade, which is cool. Demon Vision, it basically got nerfed, which is so silly because it definitely didn't need to be nerfed. What this is going to do, I mean, I guess maybe it had to be nerfed. What this is going to do is it's going to make it harder for demons to immediately locate the survivors. There's a better chance of missing them because your demon vision was nerfed from 100 meters to 85. So until your demon vision level 3 again, you don't get that 100 meters, which means it's harder to locate them when you try to do the spawn theory thing right away. I'm not sure if they addressed anything to kind of change up spawn theory yet, but this will make it a little bit harder to find survivors, but not really. There was also some skill changes here. We talked about the Kelly one. We talked about the Ed one. Scotty actually got a buff, which he super needed. They made it so his that he does 150 damage instead of 100. And then they also buffed Arthur to make it so that when he does a finisher, he keeps his ability going. Instead it was 3 seconds before, now it's 5 seconds. And then also Invigorating Possession on the Puppeteer got changed as well. So the amount of energy recovered per hit was actually increased. But again, the Puppeteer, like the power possession thing sucks so much for the Puppeteer. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, man. Now, things that they didn't talk about that actually are in the patch here. If you go ahead and you take a look at Evil Dead 1 Ash, or Sash as I like to call him, he goes ahead and has a huge change. So, like, pretty much everything about him changed, so it's kind of silly it wasn't in the patch notes. So, alternative healing got changed. Now it's based off the amount of damage you do with the weapon, which means he doesn't have to just sit here and only use a hunting knife, which is really, really nice for him. But then also these got changed. So headshots mark a target for a limited time. During this period, follow-up shots from you or your teammate deal additional damage. Now, I'm not sure if this means like only one hit like it did before, or if it's like it's a 5-second thing, and then during those 5 seconds, everybody's doing 20% increased damage. If that's the case, that's actually really sick for Sash here. And then they made it so the marked target healing. So damage restored his health, it used to be 30%, now it's 10%. So a bunch of changes here on Sash. I definitely think he's going to be interesting to play now, because again, his fear reduction has always been really nice, but now he also has that increased range, as does Pablo. So I'm definitely going to be trying out Sash here a little bit and see what he feels like in the upcoming games here. Now, we're going to have opportunities to dive way deeper into a lot of this stuff as time goes on, so stay tuned for more videos. Make sure you're subscribed in case we figure more things out. We'll be doing more videos, but something to keep in mind here that I would start considering investing in is invest in your elite units and then really try to beat the snot out of that book late game. And then if you're going to still try to do a basic possession rush early game, make sure you choose your targets and that you try to get into those one-on-one scenarios or maybe a one-on-two scenario so that you can not be wasting a bunch of energy early. And if they're deathballing and you can't get in with your units, then go ahead and try to attack cars, okay? That's the advice I have for you now. We'll get this more fleshed out as time goes on. We stream just about every single night on twitch.tv/SwingPoynt. If you want to go check that out in the description and the top comment down below. And with that, thank you guys so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next video that we do around here.